Speaking of NFL news, Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback senior NFL reporter, who was also at the Ohio State-Texas game, being an Ohio State apologist there. Okay, your takeaway from Arch Manning was what?
He's a kid in his first game as the true starting quarterback, his first game against an elite opponent. And I actually thought he showed some resilience, making some big time throws at the end of the game. There was the one for the touchdown down the right sideline. There was the one to the tight end down the left sideline on the final possession of the game. So was it perfect? No. I mean, Dan, I just like, and I've been saying this for 4 months. Like, I just think it's asinine that anybody's projecting him to be the number one pick in the draft. We don't know. He might become that, but I think there's so little that we've seen at this point, and scouts will tell you this is like there's so little you can take from two starts against a directional school and what was the worst team in the SEC last year. You don't know what's going to happen when he gets knocked around a little bit. You don't know what's going to happen when teams get 5, 6, 7 games of tape on him, and now they're able to game plan him. You don't know what's going to happen when he plays an elite opponent. And this is a process that all young quarterbacks have to go through. And because of his last name, he's been elevated to this level where the expectations are almost impossible. I mean, go back and look at like what Cam Ward's first 5 or 6 games at Washington State looked like when he went from Incarnate Word to Washington State. Now, this is a guy who became the first pick in the draft, right? And he had started for 2 years at a lower level of college football. And I think there was I want to say, a 4 game stretch where he threw 7 picks. Nobody cared because his last name's Ward, not Manning, So, I think there's a lot of talent there. I think the kid's got a great head on his shoulders by all accounts. Like, I talked to Quinn Ewers about him earlier in the offseason, and Quinn loves him. And that's a kid who would have every reason not to like him, loves him. And I've even seen some things that Arch has said that show a tremendous amount of self-awareness, like where he says things like, I can't wait to see what it looks like when I throw my first pick. And now everybody goes from thinking I'm the best player in the world to the worst player in the world. I think he's got the head and the talent to work through all of this. But I think what you saw on Saturday was part of the process of becoming a big time quarterback.
We'll be less patient with Bill Belichick and the results at North Carolina. What would you say would be, it's one game, obviously, but
Yeah.
a little bit more disturbing that this could be
Yeah.
maybe season long, maybe more systemic?
Yeah. So I would say, I expected them to lose the game because I just think TCU's got better players. The reality is they were at a talent deficit in that game. That's a well-coached team. Sonny Lubick took them to the did the national championship game just a few years ago. It's not some pushover they were playing in week one. So I thought they'd lose. What surprised me was like what a bleep show it turned into in the third quarter. And I don't know if you like how much you have the game you watched, Dan, but to me, like the third quarter, it was like almost Bad News Bears-ish. Maybe I'm dating myself a little bit with that reference, but the first play from scrimmage is a 75-yard touchdown. On the second possession, they convert 3rd and 20 with a seam route right down Main Street. And then, the running back scores in the next play untouched from 28 yards out. And then you had the fumble return for a touchdown a little bit after that. It felt like the team wasn't prepared, to come out of the locker room for the second half. And that was what was alarming to me about it. It wasn't that they lose the game. I thought they'd lose the game. It was the way that it looked towards the end. And so, I think Bill knows he's got a lot of work to do, but that was something I think you wouldn't expect from a Bill Belichick coach team, regardless of how long or short he's been in a place.
Okay, you're not reporting this, but if you were going to bet on this, what is Bill Belichick doing a year from now?
Coaching North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, I think look, like there's 70 new players. I think that's the number, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Deion Sanders went through this 2 years ago in Colorado. And I think Deion, if I remember right, didn't he beat TCU in his first game? Isn't that right?
Yeah.
But then what was their record?
I think they won
4-8.
Four games?
Right. So like Deion eventually got there, but I think some people looked at that and underestimated like what a Herculean task it is to turn over that much of the roster when you're dealing with like 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, you know? And maybe Bill, like underestimated what the task there would be. But that's a really serious overhaul of a college program. And I think, now with the benefit of having like at least a game of evidence of it, it it might have been too much to ask for a really great performance right out of the gate.
Talking to Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback, senior NFL reporter. How many teams were in play for Micah Parsons?
I think the number was six. And at the very end, maybe less, but there were six that were involved. And the Cowboys took what they felt like was the best offer. Now, I think that the thing that people are missing here, and I think this is a really interesting nuance to it, is that there's a bigger picture thought here for Dallas and what they're doing. And I'm not going to tell you that they didn't want to re-sign Micah. They did. But when things broke down in the spring, they had a series of conversations about like, okay, like what are we trying to do here? We haven't been to an NFC championship game, let alone a Super Bowl in 29 years. That's the third longest drought in the NFL. Yet I think they're top 10, top seven or eight, maybe in wins over that same period. So you've been consistently really good, but never good enough, right? Like at the end. And I think they, with a new head coach now, Brian Schottenheimer started to look in the mirror a little bit about it, and it was like, okay, like, so if we are going to get to a point where we're going to trade Micah Parsons, is there some sort of pivot we want to make here? And that pivot wound up being we want to like really lean in on what Brian Schottenheimer is trying to build here, which you've heard him use the phrase, the greatest culture in professional sports. And maybe that's a little bit of hyperbole, but like that's the idea of what they're trying to do there. And then you look at their first two draft picks in April, and it was two guys who are just middle of the fairway from a makeup and character standpoint. And Tyler Booker from Alabama and Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, really productive college players who are really great people. And then you look at what Dallas did here, right? Like, which not all six of the teams had two first-round picks on the table, but the rough ask was two first-round picks and a player that can be useful for us. And the Cowboys actually asked for Kenny Clark. And I think the Packers were taken aback a little bit by that, thinking like, well, they lost DeMarcus Lawrence. They're losing Micah Parsons here. We thought maybe they'd want an edge player. And Packers people were heartbroken, like losing Kenny Clark, right? The reason why is because of the person he is. And I think that was a huge part. That was a huge part of why Dallas asked specifically for him, because it's leaning into what they're trying to build and leaning into that whole, we're going to have the greatest culture in the NFL thing. And maybe that'll be the difference maker for us. Now, will it work? We'll see. But in drafting Booker and drafting Ezeraku and now bringing in Kenny Clark, I think they're kind of looking at it and saying, how can we make the locker room the best locker room in the NFL? And how can we empower Dak Prescott to be the leader of the team? And we'll see how all of that works out. But Micah Parsons didn't really fit into that. Now, again, they wanted to re-sign him. I'm not saying they didn't want to re-sign him. But the idea was, if we do move on from this guy, what are we going to do? And I think you see a pretty clear vision for what they're going to do on the field with the run-stopping stuff that they've said a million times now, but also off the field.
Yeah, but you don't bring in George Pickens if you're talking about the locker room.
Yeah, but that's for a year.
Okay. But now you can stop the run. Now, can you stop the pass? Right.
And I understand. And I understand there's a lot of that, right? Like in the Pickens things, that's a good rebuttal. There's no question. Like that's a big risk for them, but that's for a year and you'll see where that goes. And in the meantime, like they are able to take that money and sign some of their own guys. I mean, Deron Bland's one who's got done over the last couple of days. Tyler Smith's another. A real like foundation piece for them on the offensive line that they plan to re-sign. Like these things would be more difficult if you had Micah Parsons making between $45 and $50 million a year. So again, like I think there's just sort of a big picture idea here in the way that they're going to handle it.
Yeah, but Kenny Clark helps you now, but you don't need help now. He's not the future. You're getting two first-round picks. I mean, how did Jamal Adams got there was three first-round picks for Jamal Adams for the Jets. Like I just don't understand. If I look at some of these other players who've been traded, defensive players,
Yeah.
you got a lot more
Well,
for these guys.
and I think that to me is another valid criticism is like if you were talking about this in March and April, right? Then you should have created the tension point with your player then. And I think that piece of it to me is really important because if you are putting Micah Parsons on the market in March and April, there's way more of a market for him. It's tough to trade a guy right before the start of the season. Teams' budgets are set, their caps are set, their rosters are set. Like when you're talking about bringing in a player of this magnitude, like that's a big thing. The capital that you got to fork over for him and the contract you got to fork over, like that's a lot. And if you're looking at the idea of this and you say put them on the market in March or April, well, then you're probably going to have more teams involved because more teams are going to, sort of have stayed loose at that point with an ability to pivot and make moves at certain positions that you wouldn't be able to make in the summer. And then, like you're also the other benefit of doing it then is that you're actually going to get one of those picks on your team this year. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
instead of having to wait until 26 and 27 to have those guys on your team, like whatever picks you get in 25, now those guys are going to help you right now. So I think that's a very valid criticism that they shouldn't have let this thing linger. They shouldn't have let it go through camp. 100% I'm with you on that. Like that's a fair criticism. And they should have reached this tension point with Micah Parsons and David Mulugeta and all the people in that camp way earlier than they did.
You got your Super Bowl pick?
I can't remember who I picked, and I don't want to go again. It was Buffalo and who did I pick? You can tell how much work I put into this, Dan, how much I picked Buffalo and the Rams, I think. I think
Even
that was
with
it.
Stafford's back?
I think the Rams are going to be really good. Like, and I think Devontae Adams
Oh, I think they're
has a
going to be
chance.
good, but I'm only worried about Matthews. They go as Matthew Stafford goes.
Yeah, they do, and I think Matthews back is going to be all right. I just the people that I've talked to there, the like, and I'm not minimizing like what he's dealing with. He's definitely dealing with a serious injury, but they felt like they could have thrown him out there early in camp, and this was more about Matthews only got so many bullets left in the gun, and we don't need to be firing those bullets in the first week of August or the second week of August, especially when Jimmy Garoppolo is on the bench and he can come in and run our offense at a starting caliber level. So the other 10 guys in the huddle can get all the reps that they need running our offense to get ready for the season. So, that was sort of the approach that they took. Like until he's 100%, we're not going to put him out there. And they got very close to that, before putting him out there. And Matthew has managed these things too. Like he's had, I think from all the damage he took over the years in Detroit, like as extensional injuries for a quarterback, a wrist, an elbow. So, back is definitely not good for an older guy, but he's managed this sort of thing in the past. And I personally think like they'll be able to manage him through the season, and they've got a damn good team around him. Like I think if you look at the young talent on that team and the job that they've done moving out of like the Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Cooper Kupp era, they've done a really, really nice job of reworking that roster. And I think they're going to be right in it till the end.
Tampa Bay bandwagon starting to fill up in first class.
I like the Bucks too. I mean, the amazing thing about the Bucks, if you look at the roster, the the number of guys that are homegrown, and the depth they have there, and the way that they've been able to kind of go from the Brady era group, like same thing I was talking about with the Rams, and then draft and develop young guys and get a year ahead of things. Like Emeka Ibuka might not be a big might not fill a big need for them right now with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin coming back off the injury, but that's going to be a big need in a year or two, in all likelihood, right? So you get that taken care of now. They've done a really good job of restocking their roster, having Zion McCollum ready to go as Carlton Davis was walking out the door. Like they've just done a really good job of continuing to. I mean, churn that roster where when older players are on their way out, they have an answer. And I think Baker Mayfield is pretty underrated too. I think Baker's got a chance to have a dynamite year.
Always great to talk to you. Thank you, Albert.
All right, thanks, Dan. And by the way, thanks for the fantasy draft. Your secret is safe with us. I will say that. We took every precaution
Thank you.
necessary to make sure of it.
Yes, some of those team names, you wouldn't want me saying that around your wife, would you?
But you can say mine, right?
I could. They have all these descriptive names. Albert's Fantasy League. Albert's team is called Albert's Team.
That's because when we changed platforms, I forgot to rename it. So mine wasn't very good before that either.
Everybody has some wild, inappropriate name, and then his is Albert's Team.
Yeah. I think that was Yahoo. I think that was the automatic Yahoo name that they slapped on it.
Thank you,
but everybody appreciated it. It was really good.
Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback senior NFL reporter. Take a break. Last call for phone calls. What we learn, what's in store tomorrow, this day in sports history, right after this.